Welcome back. Today we're going to continue with the gifts, sort of in quotes, that you get from the NDE. And they are very important. When we do dying, you will see that people who've had NDEs are very privileged in the dying process, but that's all for later. So today then we'll look at these gifts, and what I would like to do is to read out some of the accounts that people have of their gifts. But first of all, what about the actual figures? For those of you who weren't here, the figures that I have study from our book, The Truth in the Light, and this is the result of 2,000 letters which we got after a TV broadcast right back in '89, and it's really very important because you're never going to get this sample again, because 98% of that sample have never heard of it. I've heard of NDEs, near-death experiences, and so you can say that they can't be contaminated by the current view that what we're seeing is the real thing. So then, after you've had your NDE, 42% said that they were more spiritual. More spiritual? Yes, wider, more sensitive to people, more sensitive to themselves, looking at a wider frame, a clearer frame of life. 48% became convinced of survival after death. That is fascinating. And so we will have a look at that. 22% that they were a better person for the experiences. So the experiences aren't negative, or certainly in the ones we had. 40% that they were more socially conscious. But by far the most commonest change reported, that is in 82% of the people, they felt they had changed after the NDE. And the major change was in attitude towards death. Now this is very important, because when we come on to do death, you will see that in some sense the near-death people are protected from the suffering which other people may go through. Now let's have a look at some of the other experiences, and I'll just read out the accounts which people gave us. At one time I was afraid of dying, but now it doesn't bother me at all. And that's so common. Another one, I'm certainly not afraid of dying. I'm pleased in a way. I was given a preview, and that's what it feels like. And again, during the whole experience, I was not afraid, and the feeling that remains with me is one of peace, certainty that there is no need to fear death. And I think if anything comes from our study of the NDEs, they don't fear death, so why should we fear death? Because we're all going to go through the same process. So if you're frightened of death, I think what we're learning is you shouldn't be. The experience has had a lasting effect on my life. If that was near death, I've no fear when my time for dying comes. I look forward to it with expectation of that wonderful joy and peace. Well, I mean, that's an amazing, amazing thing to feel, because you can give up all your attachments. You don't have to hold on to things, because dying is going to be okay. In fact, you'll see dying as part of the rich tapestry of life. We're born and we die. What the Dalai Lama says is that if we ignore death, then we will be a very different sort of society. We will collect things because after all, we fear that we feel that we're not going to die, so we can collect things. We can be angry, we can bear grudges, and that's all because we don't understand that we are impermanent. We're passing through, I don't know how many years now, 80, 90, not much more if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, you may get very few. So again, remember that you don't have to fear death. And I have some more comments for you. This incident changed my life. It made me realize that the moment of passing from life to death is wonderful. Have you heard that before? It's quite an unusual way of looking at the dying process, but that's what they say. Okay, so you say it's the near-death experience. That's true, and I wouldn't be highlighting it unless, of course, we will find that in the data when we come to look at death. Although one is unable at the time to tell people around one, and this is a sadness, so she noticed that she couldn't tell people. I've spoken of what happened to me in the belief that it might help the grieving relatives left behind, wondering and unknowing. And that's really what it's like. So let's go on. Since this experience 16 years ago, I've always felt different. I've always wanted to help people. I cannot stand all the evil, war and fighting going on, as it's so opposite to the place we all go to and to what I now feel inside. So she's changed. She doesn't like the rough and tumble of this planet. She prefers the calmer, gentler, more peaceful side. And this is certainly true after a near-death experience. Here's another one. This is from a colleague at work who had noticed something different about him after he returned. He seemed to be a changed man. Nothing that I could first put my finger on, but eventually after a few weeks I spotted the differences. His bustling, heavy-handed approach had gone, and in its place was a gentleness, quiet and calmness that I'd never seen there before. So, yes, you do change, and that's the way it goes. 47% of our sample reported some kind of psychic ability after their NDE. Now, this again is important. The psychic ability varies from telepathy, intuitions, and so on. Here's just one. One of the worst moments in my life had an unexpected ending. In other words, she had a cardiac arrest, and this is following it, which I suppose was to completely change my attitude to life. Since that traumatic time, I've no fear of death, although dying is not so easily dismissed. I believe that there is something wonderful beyond the veil awaiting all of us. Very important aftermath, that it has left me with a sort of heightened awareness. Now, please do remember this. People who have had deep near-death experiences are changed in quite a marked way. Everything creative like art, music, literature, also people, animals and nature seem almost too beautiful, touching on the vulnerable. I get such a deep emotional response. Sometimes it seems almost unbearable. Now she has changed her level of consciousness. One of the questions that I was asked after the last podcast was, how can one increase one's level of consciousness without having an NDE? You see, our understanding of consciousness is changing in a very marked way. And one of the leaders in this field is Jeffrey Martin, whose name I may have spoken about before, and this is his book, The Finders. Now, The Finders is an account of the work he's been doing, taking people through a 3-month course, and I think he gets something like a 70% change in the numbers of people who wake up, become enlightened, whichever way you like to put it, breakthrough. And this account that I've just read out, everything creative like art, music, literature, also people, animals and nature seem almost too beautiful, touching on the vulnerable. And this is one of the states which you will go into after you have made this change. And as I think I was saying last week with Sue, she had that change made to her. And it's very important because one's consciousness does expand. And here's another one, and that is the ability to heal after the NDE. I've been given the ability of healing, and I'm grateful to be able to help in this small way, said one woman. And another says she feels that she's been given support in the form of healing powers, which she channels to help people become more aware of their potentialities and strengths. Now, many of you are scientists. You say, oh, this is what she says. Has it been tested? I don't know. Because what we're doing is we're taking what people say they feel as happened to them. And of course that means that if we wish to test these things, we can do. But it's the dimension which is important, because many of these things occur and are the result of increased level of consciousness, and healing is one of these. And here's another one with psychic experiences. I'm not a particularly religious person, but at various times in my life, particularly during adolescence and times of extreme stress, she had a very early near-death experience. I have had extraordinary psychic episodes that have come completely uninvited. In no way do I dwell on spiritualism or try to encourage it in myself. I'm basically fairly down-to-earth sort of person, a mother of 4 children with plenty of friends and outside interests. So she's saying she's not introverted. She doesn't look for these experiences, but they come unbidden, and this is another of their qualities. And here's another one. Since the accident, I've become very aware of psychic things, and on several occasions have had strong premonitions. And these have eventually happened. So this is really seeing into the future. But when you think of time, we always think of a linear process going from A to B. Well, in fact, some people during the NDE say, no, the whole line is collapsed onto one point. The whole of experience is now. And those people who have an expanded form of consciousness say that they're always in the now, just the now. Imagine that. No past or little emphasis on the past, no future, little emphasis on the future, but just now. And then it goes into enormous depth. Everything is unbelievably beautiful, like I've just read out. And it's a very different world, but yet exactly the same. So these changes we see are quite interesting. Oh, look who's come to see us. Hello, Caspar. Are you coming in to make an appearance, are you? What are you going to do? Or do you think you'll just stroll across? It would be nice if you didn't come in the middle. Right, come along then. And so we're talking about premonitions that eventually happened. And she goes on to say, these are generally of bad news. I suppose good news is no news, as they say. So that's interesting. She knows nasty things which are going to happen to people, but not nice things. And she argues that nice things don't have the same emotional impact. One woman found that after her NDE, she noticed that there was a death in the family. A few days before getting the sad news, I'd been aware of a strong smell of flowers around me, not noticeable to others, even though she very rarely knew that the people concerned were ill. So she didn't know that people were ill, she didn't know that they died, but yet when they died, she experienced this very strong smell. Now that's most interesting. a number of people have reported smells at a distance when people are dying. Usually they are very fragrant, like this one. And the point about this observation, she adds, even though she very rarely knew the people concerned were ill, so it isn't expectation, it's something else. So we have to argue then that there are a whole set of phenomena which occur to these people who have a heightened consciousness. So we must think then that the near-death does several things, one of which is to give these psychic gifts, these feelings of wellness, these change in your powers of understanding, change in your ability to perceive, but generally it's a change in your ability to perceive beauty, to perceive the finer side of life, and to help you grow in your sensitivity. So I hope you find this week's discussion interesting. Next week we shall do questions, and then the week after that we'll begin on death. I hope you're all looking forward to death, because as you can see from what people report in the near-death experiences, they lose their fear. So if you can lose your fear, why are we afraid? None of them have said that they fear it much more. So this really is a very comforting piece of information for us. And finally, let me remind you that my book is coming out this week. In fact, you can get it from Amazon, you can get it from White Crow, but I think you can probably get it from any bookseller, and it's called Shining Light on Transcendence, the Unconventional Journey of a Neuropsychiatrist. And in this I talk about meeting an amazing man who, when he meditates, gives light, but it's more than that, because the light has an effect on you and changes you. Furthermore, I detail in it my career really, and mainly due to the work which I've done on meditation, and the work which I've done on consciousness. But of course there is a lot about Alain Forget, who is the man who can give light as well, because that produced some interesting experiences in me. Anyway, so there we are, and I'll see you next week. Remember, we'll be doing questions, and then the week after, if it's right, we'll then go on to death. Okay, thanks very much.